My name is Robert Woodthorpe Browne. I'm British, born in England. My job here is to represent Liberal International, which is the grouping of more than 100 liberal parties and foundations around the world, including very especially in Africa. I have been the head of the International Relations of the Liberal Democrats, which is a UK political party, for about 14 years, though I stepped down 2 years ago. But during that time also, I was on the Council of Chatham House, which is one of the world's 2 top think tanks for international affairs. So I've been always interested in that. I've also been master of the Worship of the Company of World Traders in the United Kingdom, which is a city institution, but again, very much involved with world affairs, international trade, and also with Africa. The paper shocked me in some words. One of the areas was corruption, that we always assumed that the Chinese were much more corrupt than the Europeans, but the figures didn't show that. They showed they were more corrupt or more apt to tolerate corruption, but apparently the Europeans are pretty bad at it as well. The problem is it's also that you're taking the EU as a whole, and there are lots of countries, there are 27 in the EU, and obviously they will behave in different ways given their former cultures. My own recall is when I started going to Eastern Europe was horrendously corrupt, and yet many of those countries are in the European Union now, and I can't believe they've forgotten how to do things. So that worries me. Secondly, the human rights question. The Europeans are much more concentrated on human rights, and especially gender issues, sexual issues as well, but I don't think that's important in this context. But they are very much concentrated on that and will not trade with people they think that are not respective of human rights. That includes environmental rights. So that is probably disadvantaged them if the other side, the Chinese, are ignoring that. The Chinese, however, are pretty keen on environmental issues, and in that area I think the statistics are perhaps misleading, because what has happened is that the Chinese have developed a lot of things like solar panels and have implanted them throughout Africa, and that is a very good move, and there are things they can be praised for. The Chinese, however, the big worry for a liberal and for any Democrat is the fact that they are totalitarian. They do not like democracy. They will underline it as much as possible. If somebody in Africa wants to be an autocrat, good for him. They have no objection to that. And the problem is that they then use their influence, not just in Africa, but in the South Seas and everywhere else, and in Latin America, to buy the votes of countries in United Nations and in the United Nations agencies, WTO, etc. The people will vote the China line, and if we are not careful, eventually they will have an inbuilt majority in those institutions, which will frankly, with the help of Russia as well, of course, destroy them. Well, freedom for me is the paramount freedom of the individual. In other words, liberalism exists to make sure, and government should exist to make sure, that every individual is able to achieve their potential in education, etc. And those that fall behind because they have disabilities, etc., should be helped. And that is, to me, the cardinal principle. Therefore, democracy is part of that. If you are to have freedom, if you are to be able to develop your potential, you must be able to go for any job of which you are capable, and politics should not be keeping you down. And therefore, when the Friedrich Naumann, as well as other liberal think tanks, and they're probably one of the biggest, when they do their work, it is meant to help the people, not to help the politicians. And I think that is terribly important, which is why tonight we are seeing a lot of think tanks, civil society generally. They are not the enemy of parties, of course not, because they are linked to one of the liberal parties, or the Liberal Party of Germany. But I think that it is very important that their work here, it will enable young people, women, the disadvantaged, etc., to find a voice in this country, and perhaps to make politicians a bit more honest.